Hello everyone, myself Saumya Assistant Professor, Jagannath University, Jaipur. And today we'll be talking about the 11th unit of our subject print journalism, which is editing and layouting. Editing is a responsibility shared by many people on a newspaper. It begins when a reporter polishes a news story before turning it in. It ends when final errors are corrected just before the edition goes to press. Between these events, the sub-editor practices their art of editing. The nature and need for editing. Editing is the process of preparing language, images, or sound for presentation through correction, condensation, organization, and other modifications. A person who edits, especially professionally or as a hobby, is called an editor. There are various levels of editorial positions in publishing. Typically, one finds junior editorial assistants reporting to the senior level editorial managers and directors who themselves report to senior executive editors responsible for project development to find releases. Human editors in the print publishing industry include people who are responsible for newspapers and wire services, organizing anthologies and other compilations, organizing and publishing a magazine. The top editor may be called editor in chief. Those who get the magazine into the hands of readers and subscribers even have editorial titles and are called circulation editors. Frequent and esteemed contributors to a magazine may acquire the title Editor at Large, producing a definitive edition of a classic author's works. A scholarly editor, organizing and managing contributions to a multi-author book, symposium editor or volume editor, finding marketable ideas and presenting them to appropriate authors, sponsoring editor, obtaining copy or recruiting authors such as the acquisitions editor or commissioning editor for a publishing house, improving an author's writing so that they indeed say what they want to say in an effective manner, a substantive editor. Depending on the writer's skill, this editing can sometimes turn into closed writing. Substantive editing is seldom a title. Many types of editors do this type of work either in-house at a publisher or on an independent basis, correcting spelling, grammar, and matters of house style, a copy editor. But copy editors at newspapers usually also have greater and higher responsibilities, which may include the design of page and the selection of news stories for inclusion. At UK newspapers, the term is sub-editor. Choosing the layout of the publication and communicating with the printer, a production editor. This and similar jobs are also called layout editor, design editor, news designer, or more. So in the past, makeup editor. The smaller the publication, the more these roles run together. In particular, the substantive editor and copy editor often overlap. Fact-checking and rewriting can be the responsibility of either. Principles of editing. The main consideration in editing is to tell the story in the fewest words possible. Condensation is essential because there is more material than can be used. The second consideration is clarity, which is obtained by avoiding intricate sentence structure, and by using familiar words. The third consideration is forceful expression. The sub-editor must constantly seek the most effective way to express the ideas of the story. The fourth consideration is respect for accuracy. It means looking out for small factual errors which disfigure an otherwise good story. Editing involves more than making sure words are spelled correctly, language is used properly, punctuation is in the right place, and spelling is accurate. These, however, are important details that separate a polished publication from a sloppy one. As gatekeepers of a publication, editors must have a clear idea about what the mission is. So, part of editing involves being missionaries, and part also involves being ambassadors of ideas. It is with experience that the best ideas most often come from the bottom up, not from the top down. So, editors should be encouraging writers to pursue their own story ideas. This is done with prompting, nudging, cajoling, pushing whatever works. Editing requires good listening. The writer should be heard first. Then the editor responds. The conversation process enriches stories because two heads are better than one. Conversations should be taking place when the idea is first being formulated. It should take place during and after the reporting phase. It should take place before the story is written, and it should take place after the editor has fully processed the story. At each stage, the editor should bear in mind that it is the reporter's story on the one hand, but it is also the reader's story. It is not the editor's story. Story ideas are similar to loaves of bread. All of the elements need to be brought together and kneaded. Then the dough is popped into the oven until it rises and is ready to eat. The punctuation has an important function in a story. Its function is to help guide the reader through the sentence or paragraph in a way that will make the wording more understandable. Revision. Editorial changes normally needed ink for the printer are better made clearly in pencil or the typescript. If the writer is going to see the changes, a reasonably legible photocopy can then be sent to the author for checking and revision process. The editor can draw attention to doubtful points with a marginal note. Structural reorganization. Reorganization, a whole writer, argument, or section ought to be the writer's responsibility. But the editor must have good reasons for asking for major reorganization, and they should suggest how it should be done. Expansion. If a step in the argument is missing, or if further experimental evidence is needed, only the writer can supply the missing material. Shortening. Shortening an article to a given length may be done by the author, but is often better done in the editorial office. If the writer is asked to do the work, the editor must indicate how it might be done, which sections, paragraphs, tables, or illustrations could be deleted, which part could be condensed, and which marginally relevant theme might be cut out. The title. A title that conveys the main subject or the message in a few words as possible is easy retrieval. Since editors know more about the use of titles in information retrieval than most writers, editors should have a major say in retitling stories where necessary. Spellings. The difference between American and British spelling produce problems in these days of international journals, largely in English. If the editor, publisher, or printer cannot accept inconsistency between articles, the editor or copy editor should change the spelling where necessary to whichever version is more common in the country of publication. Editing prepares a written work for publication. An editor checks for completeness, accuracy, consistency, word choice, writing style, and spelling errors, while a writer may accept, negotiate, or reject individual edits. The efforts of an editor always enhance the final product. Sometimes the editor doubles as the editor. The writer doubles as the editor. However, a professional editor with no previous knowledge of a work usually produces better results. An editor with no pride invested in a composition brings fresh insights with eyes tuned to enhance and refine. How the editing works. A written work receives two edits, the copy edit and the final proofreading. Copy editing happens when a writer turns in a draft copy. The editor examines the copy for all the things erroneous, missing, and debatable. The editor marks up the draft with corrections, suggestions, and questions. After reviewing the marked up copy, the writer makes changes while discussing questionable items with the editor. Proofreading is the final check before publishing. The writer does the final proofreading, often with the assistance of an editor or another writer. Proofreading verifies the inclusion of corrections from the copy edit. It also checks for typographical and formatting errors. The details of the proofreading process vary depending on the publishing format. For printing, publishing, proofreading reviews copies of the typeset pages. Proofing for web publishing happens in the online staging areas for the website, although some writers prefer to proofread printed copies of the web pages. Proofreading sometimes uncovers mistakes overlooked during the copy edit. Concept of editing. Reporters and correspondents write the news stories most of the time. Reporters and correspondents are in a hurry, so there is every chance of mistakes in the news story. Most of the time, reporters provide the body of the news story, but it is the sub-editor who puts soul to the news stories. What sub-editors do is called editing. It is also known as sub-editing, subbing, or sub-editing, or copy editing. Commonly, editing is understood as dotting the I and crossing the T's. Commonly, editing is understood as dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Many people think of editing as only an act of correcting the grammatical or factual mistakes in news stories. This is, however, just one aspect of editing. Editing, in fact, is the soul of journalism. It involves many things such as deciding what will and what will not be published, making the selected stories palatable and presentable, shaping it to project the publication's policies and philosophies. Editing is done to improve news stories or to change badly written news stories into readable ones. While editing, the sub-editor cares about the language. He cares about the clarity of thought and of grace of expression. He cares about the traditions of journalism and the tastes of the reading public. In this lesson, we shall discuss about some broader aspects of editing. Editing is the process of improving the hurriedly written news stories and other write-ups into readable shape. Editing in newspaper terminology is called copy editing, sub-editing or subbing. The term copy editor is used in the USA while the term sub-editor is used in the UK and many other countries including India. Editing is done with specific movie motives of checking and improving the following: punctuation, spelling, sentence structure, subject and verb agreement, proper word use, clarity, point of view, redundancies, inconsistencies, dialogue, flow, and format. In simpler terms, editing is done to improve news stories grammatically, structurally, style wise, factually, and in terms of readability. And sub-editors or copy editors do the editing. It is often thought that editors do editing. No, the editor does not do editing. The sub-editor is the unsung craftsman who works hard to improve the write-ups of the reporters, and the reporter's name appear with the news stories. Sub-editors do not get any credit for their hard work, while reporters get the entire credit and acknowledgement in the form of bylines, accolades, applause, appreciation, and even awards. The sub-editors toil away in the newsroom. Reporters and correspondents take to the center stage while sub-editors man the backstage. Editing or sub-editing, as it is popularly known, includes many activities. These are arranging, reducing, adding, translating, selecting, checking, and adapting of news and other materials for publication. Copy. Copy is nothing but written pieces, news stories, articles, features, etc. coming to a newspaper's newsroom from different sources. Reporters, correspondents, stringers, freelancers, news agencies, feature agencies, assigned writers, etc. with newer technologies like telex, fax, teletext, modern, etc. More copy reaches newsroom more easily today. These need to be screened to select the necessary stories, in addition to processing copy, writing headlines, and moving copy to the production department. Some editors are also involved with certain aspects of production like composing, layout, etc., which is usually done on the computer. Automation has made the job of sub-editors easier, but computers and other machines cannot replace sub-editors. Proofreaders and layout artists are almost extinct now. This is because of certain talents that sub-editors have, including the ability to edit copy and writing headlines. These two abilities require some judgment, scholar lines, varied exposure and experience, memory, motivation, curiosity, imagination and skepticism. A copy. Copy is nothing but written pieces, news stories, articles, features, etc. coming to a newspaper's newsroom from different sources: reporters, correspondents, strangers, freelancers, news agencies, feature agencies, assigned writers, etc. With newer technologies, how, what is editing? The editing process begins in a newspaper with a news editor or a chief sub-editor sorting out the copy to eliminate reports that could accommodated and planning the next day's page. Only newsworthy stories get selected and are passed on to the sub-editors who check the grammar, syntax, facts and figures and logic, polish up the language and condense for economy of space. Copy is edited to highlight the news sense and to impart uniformity of style. How to edit a copy. Read the story once before you edit, a second time while you edit, and a third time after you edit. On the first reading, if you find any ambiguity, contradiction, or structural flaw, summon the reporter to demand a clarification or bring it to the notice of the news editor or chief sub on duty. When the story has no glaring problem, it is fit to edit. A news story is divided into two parts: the lead, which is the intro, which introduces the story, and the body, which elaborates the lead. While the lead tells briefly who, what, where, when, why, and how of the story, the body elaborates, details, and explains it. The lead is normally written in less than 35 words and should be crisp and concise. Since World War II, the inverted pyramid style of news writing has come into vogue. This technique places the most significant information at the top and then places the remaining details in the descending order of importance. Each succeeding paragraph should add an essential detail without being dependent in content or style on what follows. The inverted pyramid style has the following advantages. The structure of the story remains intact even when paragraphs are deleted from the bottom for space shortage. A busy reader could skip over many stories in a short time by just reading the lead paragraph. It helps the sub-editor to give the headline by reading the gist of the story in the lead. It is easy to change the order of paragraphs or insert a paragraph or two. The chronological style, which is narrating the story in the sequence in which it happened, has none of these flexibilities, and often the most important part of the story may come at the end, putting the reader's patience on trial. If the most important point in a story is buried in the last paragraph, it needs to be rewritten and brought into the lead. In case there are more points fighting for prominence, the point that has more reader appeal is chosen. If the second paragraph does not support the lead, rewrite it. The third paragraph should further develop the second paragraph and the lead. Ideally, each paragraph should not exceed 3 sentences, and direct quotes add flavor to the story. Rewriting. Rewriting is done for the sake of clarity and highlighting the right news point, but taking care of avoid avoid inadvertent tampering with the facts or the original meaning. Stories are also rewritten to add punch to the lead and enliven a human interest story. Headlines. Headlines catch the eye of a reader in search of something interesting in a newspaper. After scanning the headlines, a reader settles down to read the story in detail. Characteristics of good news writing are accuracy, attribution, balance and fairness, brevity, clarity, readability, human interest, and sharp observation. A good sub-editor has a sharp news sense. He does not bring his own particular prejudices or interests into sub-editing. His news sense is related to his newspaper so that he can create exciting stories out of a mass of copy that he receives every day. A good sub-editor has an orderly mind and a cool head so that when he is faced with great piles of copy coming from all directions, he will be able to cope with them without panicking. He has to get the facts clear and in sequence in his mind or on his copy pad. Otherwise, they will not be clear and in sequence in the newspaper. A good sub-editor should have sound judgment, scholarliness, varied exposure and experience, memory, motivation, curiosity, imagination, and spectacle. Canons of good editing. There are certain things that turn an average editor into a good editor. These can be precision. If the information is not truthful, that is accurate, it's not journalism. Sticking to basics. Imagination. Convergence. Critical thinking. In journalism, as in life, you will find that not every question has a clear, ambiguous answer, or even only one answer. You can expect to be challenged to think on your feet, to analyze ambiguous information, to find answers on your own, and to evaluate the credibility and utility of various sources of information. Principles of good news editing are accuracy, number 2, attribution, number 3, balance and fairness, number 4, brevity, number 5, clarity, number 6, readability, number 7, human interest, number 8, sharp observation. Proofreading is the final stage of the editing process, focusing on surface errors such as misspellings and mistakes in grammar and punctuation. You should proofread only after you have finished all your other editing revisions. Content is important, but like it or not, the way a paper looks affects the way others judge it. When you have worked hard to develop and present your ideas, you don't want careless errors distracting your reader from what you have to say. It's worth paying attention to the details that help you to make a good impression. Most people devote only a few minutes to proofreading, hoping to catch any glaring errors that jump out from the page. But a quick and cursory reading, especially after you have been working long and hard on a paper, usually misses a lot. It's better to work with a definite plan that helps you to search systematically for specific kinds of errors. The proofreading process. Don't always rely entirely on the spelling checkers. Grammar checkers can be even more problematic. Proofread for only one kind of error at a time. Read slow and read every word. Try to read it aloud. Separate the text into individual sentences. Circle every punctuation mark. Read the paper backwards. This is a very helpful technique. Proofreading is a learning process. You are not just looking for errors that you recognize, you are also learning to recognize and correct new errors. Ignorance may be a bliss, but it won't make you a better proofreader. The proofreading process becomes more efficient as you develop and practice a systematic strategy. The proofreading process becomes more efficient as you develop and practice a systematic strategy. You will learn to identify and specific areas of your own writing that need careful attention, and knowing that you have a sound method for finding errors will help you to focus more on developing your ideas while you are drafting the paper. That's all for today. We'll catch up in the next class. Thank you very much.